The anatomy of a kamikaze attack. A closer look at Japan's deadly WW2 tactic.
During the final stages of World War II, as the tide turned irrevocably against Japan, the Imperial Japanese Navy and Air Force resorted to desperate measures in an attempt to stave off inevitable defeat. Among these measures, the kamikaze tactic stands out as one of the most extreme and tragic strategies employed during the war. Kamikaze pilots, transforming their aircraft into human-guided missiles, wreaked havoc on Allied naval forces in the Pacific. This analysis delves into the anatomy of a kamikaze attack, exploring the strategy, execution, and devastating impact of this infamous method of warfare. The birth of the kamikaze strategy. By 1944, Japan's situation in the Pacific had become increasingly dire. The Allies, advancing steadily toward the Japanese home islands, had exposed the weaknesses of Japan's conventional military tactics. With dwindling resources, depleted manpower, and the loss of air superiority, Japanese commanders were forced to consider more drastic measures to defend their nation. The kamikaze tactic, officially known as Special Attack Units, was conceived as a last-ditch effort to turn the tide. The idea was simple yet horrifying. Pilots would deliberately crash their planes, laden with explosives, into enemy ships. The goal was to inflict maximum damage with minimal resources, using the aircraft and pilot as the weapon itself. Contrary to popular belief, not all kamikaze pilots were blindly fanatic or brainwashed. Many were young men, some still in their teens, driven by a complex mix of emotions, including nationalism, a sense of duty, and a desire to protect their homeland and families from the feared consequences of an Allied invasion. Their training, while rigorous in discipline, was often rushed, focusing on basic flying skills and the execution of the suicide mission. The execution of a kamikaze attack. The first official kamikaze mission occurred during the Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944. On October 25th, Lieutenant Yukio Seki led the Shikishima Special Attack Unit in a coordinated assault on Allied naval forces. The attack marked a grim milestone as Seki's plane, along with others in his unit, struck the USS St. Lo, a US Navy escort carrier. The ship was severely damaged and sank, marking the first time in history that a kamikaze attack had successfully sunk a warship. A typical kamikaze attack followed a pattern designed to maximize the chances of success. The planes, often outdated and stripped of non-essential equipment to increase their speed and maneuverability, were loaded with explosives. The pilots would approach their targets in groups, flying low to avoid radar detection and anti-aircraft fire. Upon reaching the vicinity of the enemy fleet, the group would split into smaller units, each pilot selecting a target. As the pilot entered the final approach, the aircraft would transition into a steep, near vertical dive, aiming directly for the ship. The tactic was not only terrifying for those on the receiving end but also brutally effective. The sheer velocity of the dive, combined with the explosives on board, ensured that even if the plane did not hit a critical area of the ship, it could still cause significant damage. Defensive measures and the evolving kamikaze threat. The Allied forces, initially caught off guard by the kamikaze tactic, quickly adapted their defensive strategies. Radar picket ships, positioned at varying distances from the main fleet, played a crucial role in detecting incoming kamikaze planes. These radar pickets, along with combat air patrols of fighter aircraft, sought to intercept and destroy the kamikaze planes before they could reach their targets. Despite these defenses, the kamikaze attacks continued to inflict severe damage on the Allied fleet. The use of proximity fuses, which detonated anti-aircraft shells near enemy aircraft rather than requiring a direct hit, improved the effectiveness of anti-aircraft fire. In addition, the tactic of circling the wagons, where destroyers would form a protective ring around high-value targets like aircraft carriers, provided an additional layer of defense. One of the most harrowing examples of a kamikaze attack occurred on November 25, 1944, when a bomb-laden kamikaze aircraft struck the USS Essex. Despite the damage, the Essex remained operational, demonstrating the resilience of Allied ships even under such brutal attacks. However, not all vessels were so fortunate. The USS Saratoga, for example, was struck by multiple kamikaze planes in February 1945, suffering significant damage but ultimately surviving the war.
The psychological impact of kamikaze attacks.
Beyond the physical damage inflicted, kamikaze attacks had a profound psychological impact on Allied sailors. The sight of an enemy aircraft hurtling toward them with no intention of pulling up was both terrifying and alien to the Western mindset. Vice Admiral C.R. Brown of the U.S. Navy later remarked on the hypnotic fascination of watching kamikaze planes dive, a mixture of horror and helplessness as the pilots carried out their final fatal missions. For the kamikaze pilots themselves, the psychological toll was equally significant. While many went to their deaths with a sense of resolve, others harbored deep doubts. In a letter to his mother, written shortly before his final flight, Japanese pilot Ichizo Hayashi expressed his conflicted feelings. "I cannot say that the wish to die for the Emperor is genuine, coming from my heart. However, it's decided for me that I do die for the Emperor." The legacy of kamikaze attacks. From October 1944 until the end of the war in August 1945, thousands of kamikaze attacks were launched, resulting in the deaths of approximately 4,000 pilots. These attacks sank or damaged hundreds of Allied ships and caused over 7,000 casualties. Despite their destructiveness, kamikaze attacks ultimately failed to achieve their strategic objective of halting the Allied advance. In the years following the war, kamikaze attacks have been studied as both a military tactic and a psychological phenomenon. They are remembered as a symbol of the desperation that marked Japan's final months of the war and the devastating consequences of a nation pushed to the brink. The ruins of ships like the USS St. Lo, along with the stories of those who witnessed these attacks, serve as a somber reminder of the lengths to which people will go in times of war. The anatomy of a kamikaze attack reveals a tragic convergence of technology, ideology, and human sacrifice. It was a tactic born of desperation, carried out by young men whose lives were cut short in a war that had already claimed millions. As we reflect on this dark chapter of history, we are reminded of the immense cost of conflict and the enduring impact of those who lived and died through it.